Hello everyone, welcome to Tea Time History Chat. Not live because I'm on tour. I am on the Rise of the Tudors tour as we speak. But this week I am here also and I have another guest, which I'm really enjoying doing this for the weeks that I'm not with you live. I bring you someone I've been chatting to, and today it is Matt Brown, who has a fantastic Substack called The Londonist and Londonist Time Machine, where he has weekly blogs about London history and London landmarks and things that are going on in London in terms of, events that you might want to go and see, exhibitions, all sorts. Brilliant publication. So I'm going to be bringing Matt up very soon. Before I do that, I just want to say thank you very much for joining me, for watching. This goes out on YouTube and Facebook, but if you want to follow along on the tour, I'm actually very active on Instagram as well. I just don't do these shows on Instagram at the moment. Maybe I'll go back to doing that. We used to do it. But anyway, if you want to follow the tour, The Rise of the Tudors, live vicariously through us for the week, then come over to my Instagram, which is at British_history_tours. Part of that tour, we have 4 talks. Because if you come on my tours, you are traveling with historians, you are meeting historians, and you get to listen to historians in private talks. Now, if you're a member of my Patreon, which many actually, it's lovely now because people in my Patreon come on tours, people on my tours come in my Patreon, it's lovely. But if you're in my Patreon, you will get to also see those talks. Caveat being, as long as my recording equipment works. But yes, they will go into Patreon, so that's patreon.com/British history. There's already talks in there from Tracy Borman, Kate McCaffrey, James Clark. So we're going to have Gareth Russell's talks in there, Nathan Armeen and Nicola Tallis as well. So they'll be in there. So it's £5 a month. It's well worth it. We do all sorts. There's not just that. You get to put forward your questions when I have historian interviews coming up. You get to put forward your questions to them. And we also have Historical Book Club. And at the moment, I am gathering in suggestions for the long list. So this is the list of books that people get to vote on as to what we're going to be looking and reading in 2025. So if you want to put your 2 pence in, then get in there now and you can put some suggestions in. I'm going to make the long list and then we'll take a vote. So you can be involved in that as well. We're also on our last book for the year for 2024, and it is the one behind me. If you're watching this, because this is also going out on the podcast, thank you to those who are listening on the British History podcast. It's called Hunting the Falcon by John Guy and Julia Fox. It's about the relationship between Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn, and it's called The Marriage That Shook Europe. So I'm currently about halfway through, actually, and we're meeting to discuss that on the 10th of November. It's on a Sunday evening, my time. So Sunday, somewhere in the daytime, wherever you are in the world, over Zoom, so we can all get together and discuss the book. It's really cool. So those are the main things for the time being that aren't to do with what I'm going to be talking about today. So without further ado, I will introduce you to Matt. Like I say, he's the writer behind Londonist and Londonist Time Machine. So I've been reading his blog for quite a while, so I'm really looking forward to chatting to him today. So I've been looking at your blog for quite a long time. I fully admit I've only just become a paid subscriber, and that's nothing to do. That's to do with the fact that I usually get your emails on my phone and I hadn't set up Substack. But anyway, long story short, I am now a paid subscriber.
Thank you.
So I want to come to one of your meetups as well at some point.
Great. Yeah,
which would be fun. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you came to be writing The Londonist?
Please? Yep, sure. So I'm actually from a scientific background, which is a very different world to what I do these days. I studied up in York, chemistry and then biochemistry. Oh. And you can probably tell from my slight accent, I'm a northerner originally. I grew up on the east coast in a place called Grimsby in Lincolnshire. And that's quite a small town. And York, although it's a reasonably big town and big tourist scene, is quite small compared to London. So when I moved down to London in at the end of the 20th century, that's how old I am, it just blew me away. Immediately, I fell in love with London. It was so big, so interesting, so historic, so full of a diverse range of people who, many of these ethnicities or religions I'd never encountered before in places like Grimsby and York. So I utterly fell in love with the place on the first day. And here I am 26 years later, and I'm still every bit as in love with the city. And my route through to doing Londonist, it's unusual, but it's not that unusual, really. So I say I've got a science background. I went into science publishing, so I was taking scientific papers, looking at the technical details, make sure they make sense, dealing with authors, which was great, but I soon got a little bit tired of that. So I moved more into the science journalism side of things. I sort of learned to write, I learned to interview people, I learned to get out there and explore and see what's going on in the world of science. And you learn a lot of transferable skills when you do that. You learn how to set out your text with punchy introduction, all the usual writing tips and things. And then how to promote it as well on social media and things like that. So I sort of learned the tools of the trade in the science publishing realm. But then 20 years ago now, I started to notice this blog that had started up called Londonist. It's positively ancient for a website these days. It's 20 years this year. Indeed, next month is our 20th birthday. And back then it was very amateur. It was just a group of mates who would bash out some words, mostly taking the mickey out of the Mayor of London and Transport for London and local news and things like that. And it was great fun. But I thought I have to join that team. It sounds great that just in your spare time you can write about the city you love. And I did. And I never could quite walk away from it, because over the years we got more and more professional. We turned it into a business. I got a salary out of it. I made some great friends there, great team. It's evolved a lot over the years, and we're now, reasonably well known. And we've got this Substack thing as well, where we do the Londonist Time Machine, a weekly dose of history of London, which is also going quite well. And I always say it's like being a Blue Peter presenter. Blue Peter, for those who aren't British, is a kids show where the presenters go off and do exciting, interesting things like climb over bridges or go down in the sewers or whatever. And doing Londonist is a bit like that, because I get to go on interesting site visits. I've been down into the sewers 4 times. I've been at the top of every skyscraper. I get to do all kinds of interesting stuff. So it's the kind of job you can't ever walk away from, really. And it's been the love of my life and continues to be.
Wow. So how long have you been writing for the Londonist then, did you say?
I've been doing 19 years. 19
okay.
So I didn't set up Londonist. I should say, so Londonist is primarily a website, and we do maybe 4 or 5 articles a day on there, mostly things to do in town. So if you want to see what's going on in the West End or guided walks, whatever, we've got long listings and we've got previews of upcoming exhibitions, things like that. That's the bread and butter. We also do daily news. There's bits of London news in there. We do quite long features about the history and culture of London. It's a real mixture. It's a sort of magazine format. And then we have the various newsletters. There's the history newsletter I already explained. We've got an arts one as well. We've got one specifically about Croydon, the southern borough of London there, for people who live or particularly enjoy Croydon. We've got a newsletter just for that, as an experiment in hyperlocal writing.
That is hyperlocal. Croydon. Yeah. Okay. That's
Londonist in a nutshell. Yeah, and we sometimes do live events, and it's I don't know, it's just whatever we think might be an interesting thing for Londoners and visitors to learn more about the city. We'll try and do it.
That's an amazing amount of content that you create. That's incredible. I wonder if London is pretty much the only city in the UK you could do that for. I can't think of even Edinburgh. I can't think that anything could.
Yeah, I mean,
you could have that much going on.
There are other sites and organisations that do this. Manchester's got a particularly good one on Substack. It's called The Mill, I think. That's more news focused. So if you focus on news, then of course you can do lots of stuff. It's like the modern version of a local newspaper, but online. To do it for arts and culture and history, yeah, maybe London, Edinburgh, possibly somewhere like York with a big tourist footfall. But yeah, you're right. London it's in a class of its own when it comes to this kind of thing.
So I've come to you via the history route, most definitely. That's what gets me. Try and avoid current affairs as much as possible, especially in my reading. But your blogs, well, it's interesting what you say there about actually learning the trade of journalism and writing, because your blogs are very easy to read, but very informative and very amusing.
Thank you.
The description of you described one of the gardens looking toward. I think it was in one of the articles you were writing about the London Museum. You were covering the fact that there was bits that you could still see of the Roman walls and stuff around the London Museum, and that's about to go because they're going to do whatever they're doing to that area. Maybe you know more about that than me. And you do this beautiful description of the flowers and the and the wildlife, and then the fox turds. And I was like, what? It's just in there. It was just very very funny. So yeah, your writing is very engaging.
No, thank you.
Yeah, you can tell actually nowadays with our reduced attention spans. If I'm still scrolling through a blog and not wondering sort of how long there is left to go, then you've done well. You've engaged me. So yeah, so you've got so that's the main way I've come to you, is through the Substack. So actually I didn't realize there's a website, so that's really good to know, because I will check that out. And you've got on there on the Substack, you've got like the history radar. That's really interesting. Tell people about that.
Yeah, so we do 3 newsletters a week, actually. The third one is only for paying subscribers. The second one is half, you get half of it, and then the other half is for paid subscribers. But the top half is a kind of events listing of things that might be of interest to people who like London history. So it's upcoming talks. We don't do tours in there quite often because there's just so many of them that we run out of space, unless it's a big event that maybe a museum's putting on or something. It might be things like a chance to go into a historic building you can't normally go into. So this coming weekend, we've got the big Open House Festival. It'll be in the past for people listening to this, but Open House Festival is when all these old buildings around London, hundreds of them, open their doors and let you in to look around. And it's like Christmas for me. I sort of plan it in minute detail and try and get to as many.
What time do you get up in the morning? You're like trying to fill like 2 full days.
I'm out at 6. Yeah, I don't often get to get away from the kids at a weekend, but my wife lets me for open house because she knows how special it is. So, I mean, that's the kind of thing we put in the history radar. There's usually something like that. I mean, even outside of open house weekend, there's usually some old building that's opening its doors somewhere. So you'll find events about history talks and things like that. And there's usually like 8, 9, 10 events in there, so it's quite a lot going on each week.
It's a really good resource if people are coming to London, and then what's, because it's coming. If you just Google something, it's hard. I think the place to come is you. If you're coming to London to see, okay, I'm in London for a few days. What should I do? Because it's very immediate. This is the stuff that's literally going on now. You don't have to kind of search for it. So I think that's really, really, really useful for people.
Thank you. Yeah, and of course we have wider listings on the main website as well. So we do a weekly things to do in London, and that's got something like 100 events going on in any given week, and we publish that every week on a Saturday. So that's a place to go for more general events outside of history.
Brilliant. Okay, now you. I know there's a difference between the paid and the unpaid, but even the free one, people get quite a lot of information. You're very generous with the free bit, and so I've been reading about the beasts of London. And last week we put this off for a week because you were invited to go and crawl through London Bridge. London Bridge is the boring looking one, everybody. But more interesting on the inside, I think it turned out to be. So I know there's the difference, but you do cover quite a lot in the free stuff, so people can check that out. What's one of your I know you're covering so many topics, but do you have any favorite topics? Anyone, if you're saying, right, go and I know I published it a year ago or whatever, but go and see that one because that one's really fun.
Yeah, well, there's quite a few on there that that I'm quite proud of. One ongoing project I'm doing. There's this gorgeous map of London that was made.
I wanted to ask you about this.
It's made in the 18th century, so 1746, I think it was. And it was the first really detailed map of London. It's so detailed. Every single alleyway is named, I mean, it's even got like trees, and there's even people rowing on the Thames drawn onto the map. It's absolutely gorgeous, by a guy called John Rock. And that's nearly 300 years old, and it's amazing. It's a great work of cartography, and it was the first properly surveyed map of London as well. It's always been in black and white, and I sat there helping my 5-year-old colour in some Paw Patrol one day, and it just occurred to me that this map I've known it for years. I use it all the time. Wouldn't it be great to colour in that map and see what it looks like in full colour for the first time? And so I started doing it, and I quickly thought, oh, this is going to take me years, because the detail is so intricate. It's in 24 different panels. One panel takes 20 to 30 hours to colour in full. So it's a big job. But the results have been really good. So it really helps see different patterns of land use in sort of Georgian era London. You can see how Southwark Borough, the southern parts of London, developed along Borough High Street and the old Roman roads, and you can see where, because the buildings are a different colour to the fields and things on my coloured in version. For the first time, it really pops out at you just how Southwark developed as a town in its own right. And yeah, it's had loads of interest. I've had people approach me wanting prints, wanting me to turn it into a book at some stage, and all kind. It's going to have a long afterlife.
I think so, yeah.
But it's also going to have a long present life, because I've done 4 and a bit of these panels, and there are 20 more to go. Yeah. And I've been working on it since the start of the year, so it's going to be 2026 or 7. I think.
Your children will be old enough to help you colour them in.
Oh, they already are helping.
Oh, there you go.
I've got an 8-year-old who's done a little bit of it for me. Yeah, so it's all done in Photoshop, so it's all digital, and you can do clever things in that speed it up a bit more than if you were using felt tips. And of course, when it's digital, you can fade different layers in and out. So I can remove all the housing, or remove all the fields, or only show the hidden rivers, which aren't there anymore. It over. So yeah, I did a kind of follow-on article recently that looked at all the rivers that used to flow through Southwark, all gone now, not a single one of them there. And you can kind of see certain roads follow the routes they do because they were tracking alongside an old stream or something like that. So the very act of colouring in a map is, I'm finding new information about the history of London from the act of colouring, which I think it was totally unexpected when I started the project, but it's leading off in all kinds of interesting directions.
It is very interesting. I read your article about the waterways, and it made more sense of how the land is being used and how it was developed, didn't it? Like you say, the roads are following next to a stream or whatever. Yeah. Road names, did you come across road names that made more sense because of features?
Yeah, well, there's a curious street name in Southwark called Great Maze Pond. Maze Pond. I've always wondered about that. I mean, what was the maze? Where was the pond? And you can see on this 18th century map, there was actually a pond next to this road, Great Maze Pond. So that explains the pond bit. I'm still not entirely sure where the maze comes from. I think there was a house called the Maze, but it's not clear why the house was called the Maze in the first place. So more research needed there. But you often find walking around London, always read the street signs and try and work out why that name is as it is. I mean, most famously, Fleet Street, named after the River Fleet, which is still down there as a sewer. It's just before Ludgate Hill, just before that rise up. If you look at St. Paul's Cathedral, it's on a hill. And the valley of that hill is where the River Fleet used to flow, and that's where Fleet Street's name comes from, as you very well know. But I think not many people from outside London necessarily know about these hidden rivers, so it's always interesting to flag them up.
Yeah, it is, because it's so difficult to even work out where the hills are in London, especially if you're, on a bus or a car going through. If you walk, you're probably a little bit more aware that you're going up a hill. But even then, really, because it's so built up, it's difficult, I think, to see, because obviously you've got buildings of different sizes, so the perspective, and it is difficult. And of course, it is a hilly city. That's why the Romans first decided to build there. But yeah, and all these rivers that are underneath, and I mean, yeah, me with my sewage background, my water background. I remember I used to work with I used to work on a flooding team because of course and you'd get people living on places like Watery Lane, and you're like, what did you because there's no evidence anymore of like a permanent river or stream or something like that. There's a reason why this name is here, and that's the map. I think the way the project that you're doing with colouring in, obviously it makes it look pretty. I think everyone loves a map. There's something different about a map. Maybe it's just because it's a picture and you can take in more information in a picture than you can with words. Because I was looking at one of the Georgian ones that you've done earlier, and I noticed Melancholy Lane. So the names of the streets are popping out, or the alleyways and whatever popping out. And so, do you know anything about Melancholy Lane?
No, I don't. I don't know why that would be called that. It's a strange name for a street.
Yeah.
Usually
I'm worried now. I'm worried about the people who used to go there and just cry or something.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe it was undeveloped for years and was, I don't know, just a marshland or something. And so people didn't use the land, and it's maybe a sad place. But no, usually when there's an unusual name, it's an old pub sign or something. So you got the Hanging Sword Alley in Fleet Street area, for example. There's lots of examples like that. And it's usually the name of a pub, and the pubs are usually named because they needed a distinctive hanging sign in the days when people couldn't read. And a hanging sword is quite a distinctive emblem symbol.
Yeah.
The latest map I coloured in, the Borough Market sort of area, is particularly replete with slightly bizarre, not so nice names. Like there's Dirty Lane, there's Foul Lane. There's quite a few of these noxious sounding streets, and they were all erased from the map long ago for obvious reasons, but recently Dirty Lane has come back again. They built a new development around the back of Borough Market, and they've reinstated an old alleyway and called it Dirty Lane after this long lost alley that used to go there. So sometimes these things can come back.
Now that's not the only map that you've coloured, and this is actually initially how I sort of took a lot of interest in you. Can you talk to us about the copper plate maps?
Well, this is even more fascinating, this map. So this is a proper Tudor map, and it's the earliest known map of London. It was made, no one's quite sure exactly when, but probably in the reign of Queen Mary, spilling possibly over into Queen Elizabeth, somewhere between the two, and in the 1550s. It's a gorgeous thing. Again, it's done in a kind of weird 45-degree angle, so it's not quite as top down as we're used to in maps today. It's done slightly with the buildings raised up. It's got lots of people in the background. You can see people doing archery in the fields in the background. You can see women hanging out or pegging out their wet laundry to dry on the fields at Moorgate. It's just infinitely alluring, and it's even more so because only 3 of, I think it's about 20 known, they think there were 20 panels, only 3 of them survive, and so we don't know what the rest of this map would have been like. We have clues. There's another map copied it a decade or so later, but it's at much lower resolution. So it's, for me, the greatest missing artifact in London's history are the remaining panels of the copper plate, and they're quite possibly out there because the 3 we do have were only found in recent decades. They were found on the backs of artwork because the copper plates which they're etched into were often reused by painters, particularly in the Low Countries, because it made a good surface to paint onto. And so all the 3 panels we have were rediscovered when someone just opened up an old painting and looked on the back, and there was the map engraved in copper. So quite possibly the remaining ones are out there. So if you've got a kind of Flemish painting from the 16th century in your attic, do have a look on the back, because
give it a quick tap and see if it tings.
However good that painting is, I think to retrieve another panel of the copper plate would be wonderful. And I started colouring this one in because of all London's maps, it's enchanted me the most over the years. The Museum of London, now called the London Museum, they hold, I think, 2 of the 3 plates, and I don't. So they're currently moving home. So that museum's closed at the moment. I don't know if they're going to redisplay the copper plate in their new museum. I hope they do.
I hope they do.
It's their greatest treasure. But if you ever get a chance to see it in the flesh, I'd recommend it. But yeah, so I coloured that one in. That took even longer because of the nature of the map. It's etched into copper, and it's 500 years old. So bits of that etching are worn away, and so parts of the map are fainter than other bits. So before I could colour it in, I had to actually restore it by drawing over lots and lots and lots of houses or edges of roads and things like that. You kind of see what was originally there. It's there very faintly, so I had to re-pen it all in Photoshop and then colour it in. So that took a very, very long time.
Mindfulness. We call it mindfulness nowadays.
Yes.
It was a nice,
I call it escaping from the kids for an hour or two and leave them to
Daddy,
me for a bit.
it's very, very important. This.
Yeah.
Because were they like printing plates? Is that why you've got
that's right.
wear on them?
Yeah. So these things were etched into copper, and then you could mass produce paper copies from that plate. No paper copy has ever turned up, so
Really?
we don't even
But they'd
notice.
be big, wouldn't they? Then, because I'm trying to think. I have seen the copper plates, and they're fairly.
Yeah, they're quite big. They're maybe half a metre long, like a foot and a half, 2 feet, something like that.
So I wonder for whom an entire map would be printed, or would it be you'd get a plate, like you get an OS map and you get the square on the, you don't get a whole one of the UK.
Well, it wouldn't be for general consumption. These things would have been extraordinarily expensive to buy. So I'd imagine it'd be for wealthy lords and administrative bodies, things like that would want a copy. We don't know for sure whether they ever were even printed. We can assume so, but there's no great evidence they were ever printed.
Right.
No paper copy ever turned up. And we know very little about who did it, who made it. It's a real mystery. So I've coloured in all 3 known plates, and they're there on the Londonist Time Machine site for anybody to look at.
Yeah, they're well worth it. And you've done high res versions for paid subscribers, haven't you? So you can really study them.
I can't remember the size of the file, but it's at the very limits of what Substack would take. It's a really sort of high. I've got it even higher definition on my computer. If any historians want a genuine copy of the original file, but it's that process. Just those 3 plates probably took me half a year. Been quite intense. Obviously I was doing other things as well, but all the spare time I had went into those. It's kind of what I'm trying to do with the Substack, the Londonist Time Machine, is not just write articles about the history of London that just copy what other people have done before, but actually trying to do things that move the story forward in some way or add value to things that already exist. And colouring in maps is one example of how we're doing that.
No, it's a very interesting project, and I'm looking forward to seeing more as you get them done.
Thank you.
And it's just like you've said, the unexpected detail that it throws up, you wouldn't think just by colouring them in, but I think you said things just either pop out or just weren't really discernible without the difference in colour.
Well, especially with the copper plate, because as I say, some of those plates were very faded. So even people who've looked quite intensely at these plates might have half ignored those bits because you just can't really see what's going on unless you spend a lot of time carefully retracing. So it's pulled out details that haven't been seen for 450 years or so. So hopefully it's of use to somebody somewhere. And if not, it's at least an interesting thing to look at, I think.
I'm sure it will be. I think I feel a book coming on, Matt. You're definitely going to have to do that. I'm looking forward to the London Museum reopening. I really hope there's some things that I just really hope make it back. I don't think this will, but I'm going to mention it because you might be a fellow fan of the model of the Fire of London. Did you see that?
That or something like it is bound to be there because it was so popular. I think maybe they'll use the opportunity to rebuild it, redo it.
I think it needed some work on. I did get told once by a room guide, whether he was joking or not, that it was ironically a little bit of a fire hazard itself because of It was becoming, I think it was 100 years old almost at that point. Yeah, so but I loved it. I thought it was great. It's a, for anyone who hadn't seen it, it's a model of London, and the light, the light, it lights up as the fire, to kind of recreate how the fire spread. So yeah, any other story? I tell you the one I noticed this morning, which was just again made me giggle. It is very funny. Your writing is great. Jane Mansfield opening the Chiswick flyover.
Oh yeah. That is a bizarre story, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, Jane Mansfield's, I imagine, quite largely forgotten these days. She's not. She was one of those blonde bombshells of the 50s, very much in a Marilyn Monroe style. American actress and model. And yeah, she was flown over to London to open a flyover, like a freeway, a motorway bridge in West London, in the Chiswick flyover. And it's one of the most unglamorous structures imaginable. And for somehow they persuaded her to come over and do it. And she claimed she was charmed by it, but I don't know what her secret innermost thoughts were about it. But very bizarre.
It is just a piece of concrete, isn't it?
Yeah,
almost like brownie concrete as well, from what I remember.
It's nothing special. And if you go there today, they've actually got not a plaque, but they've got it's like a road sign they've put under the flyover with a quote from Jane Mansfield. I can't remember her exact words, but she said something like, "It's a dainty little flyover" or something, and they put that.
To an American, it is a dainty flyover. I mean, this is like this is not the kind of flyover that people can imagine.
No.
Dainty is probably, I imagined that is what she thought.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you got down to London, you found London fascinating. Do you think London's just going to keep churning out? Do you ever think, I hope there's something I can write about this week?
No, never. I've got a long list of stuff I want to write, and the maps alone are going to keep me going for a year or two. I've got another ongoing project on Londonist Time Machine where I'm experimenting with writing in the location where the history happened. Because now we've got modern technology, we've all got smartphones. I can actually sit on the spot and type into my phone what happened. I trialled this in Victoria Park in the east of London and just spent the day in Victoria Park writing on my phone about whatever history I could discern by reading the information boards, my own internal knowledge that I've read before, and talking to people and putting together a piece of writing that's just entirely based on the scene. Not allowed to look at Wikipedia, not allowed to look at the web, not allowed to fiddle with it afterwards, apart from the odd typo, and then present that as a piece of history writing. And it's experimental, and that can keep me going for years, because I could try that in any number of places. But I think it turned out fairly successfully. It's a nice mix of history, but woven into it are observations that I see on the day. Like there was a guy walking his dogs, and he was going up to everybody he saw, telling them about a campaign that he's involved with, because they're trying to ban dogs from the parks in that part of London unless they're on a lead or a leash for your American listeners. And he was dead against it. He thinks dogs should be allowed to run around. So getting that little bit of detail that I could not possibly have known from desk research, it just adds a sort of immediacy to the writing. So I need to develop that a bit more. I've only tried it once, but I think there's something in it that nobody's really tried before. So again, that's what I'm trying to do with Time Machine. Always do something a little bit different. And there will be things like the Jane Mansfield story that anyone could do. It's just doing a bit of desk research and going to the site and get some photos. But on the whole, I try and make the articles original and from a totally different angle that anyone's tried.
I love that idea, because you're capturing now as well as the history. I think that's great, because I do always wonder, in this age of technology, and we assume everything is getting recorded somehow. And we lament in the past we don't know the lives of the ordinary, quote unquote, ordinary folk, which I think we are. And yet I think, well, where's it being recorded, really? The ordinary things that are going on day to day. News stories will be there, films will be there, but so I think that I mean, in that small part, that is really that's almost doing that, a little way. It's great.
Leaving it in.
Yeah. So any projects you've got lined up other than that you can talk about?
I'm working on a book about London. So next year is the 60th anniversary of the formation of Greater London, when we created 32 boroughs that became Greater London. That setup is 60 years old next year. So with an artist friend I've worked on previous books with, we're making a kind of atlas of the 32 boroughs plus the square mile. And then I'm writing the text to go alongside it with kind of slightly quirky guide to each borough, what you can see there, and a bit of history as well. So that will be out summertime next year, 2025.
That sounds good. That'll keep you busy then as well. So
come to the end of it. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
That'll be really interesting because, London, and what is London? What's the city? Because again, back to like how it's all built up, everything just merges. London's not unique in that respect. But yeah, that would be really, really interesting. And obviously with illustrations and maps, we're all in for that. We love that. So people can find you. So remind people where they can find you. And yeah, maybe we'll get to meet in person on your, how often do you do these get-togethers in the pubs?
So for the newsletter, we have every 2 to 3 months we meet up in a historic pub, and there's no agenda. People just come and chat about London history and enjoy a drink. And we also do the occasional site visit to interesting locations. So nothing like the sewers or inside London Bridge, but maybe a small museum that's not that easy to access ordinarily. So we do those every 2 or 3 months as well. So it's like a little perk for people who paid subscribers. We try and arrange those trips to give them something as well as something to read. They can come along to these events, get a bit more for their money. Yeah. So, and I'm watch this space. There's a really interesting small museum I've got lined up for November, which I'll be putting in Friday's newsletter. So,
well, hopefully I'll be able to get. I don't live anywhere near London, but I if I can get down, I will, because I think that sounds like a lot of fun. And I imagine, getting to meet people like I found on my tours, you're getting to meet people who are into the same things that you are, and it's great.
Yeah, so the place to look, it's a newsletter on the Substack platform, but it's all over the web, called Londonist Time Machine. And that's part of a wider site called Londonist.com, the one that's been going 20 years. Londonist.com's got all your things to do and events and stuff. Londonist Time Machine, if you're into deep dives into history, that's the place to go. I
would thoroughly recommend it, and I will be recommending it on my Substack. So thank you so much, Matt. That's been fabulous to talk to you today.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much to Matt for joining me. Thank you to you for watching and listening, if you're listening on the podcast as well. I will be back here next week live, back from tour. So I will definitely have some wonderful stories to tell you about the places we have been. Maybe I'll pick out a couple of places to go into in depth with you if you're interested in that. It's just, we really are going to some interesting places. So make sure you do follow, if you're not already, me on Instagram at British_history_tours. I will also be writing about it on my Substack, which is philippab.substack.com. And if you'd like to come on tour with me as well, please do. Like, honestly, that I will cover as much as I can online, but there is nothing that beats being in these places with these historians, the expert guides that we have, with people who are as interested as you are. People make lifelong friends on my tours, and it is fantastic to watch. It's really heartwarming. Nothing to do with me. It's just the vibe. It's fantastic. So you can look up my tours on www.britishhistorytours.com, or if you're signed up to my Substack, then you will get information about the tours as they go live. We've got a very exciting 2026 program coming up. We might even squeeze another one into 2025. We shall see. And if you're a member of my Patreon, you get exclusive you get a week basically to book before anyone else does. You get VIP access to booking, and you can join my Patreon by going to patreon.com/British history. All right, everyone, I'll leave you to your day now. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope to see you again next week. All right, everyone. Bye-bye.